Hi friends, Krista here. Thanks for stopping by another Vlogmas video. And today we are going to be talking about anticipated reads for the first quarter of 2024. This is my fourth year where I will be looking ahead to books that are coming out and letting you know of ones that sound a little bit interesting to me. I don't know if they're great or not, so this is not necessarily a recommendations video. Just as I was scrolling through NetGalley and looking up on Google like books coming out in March 2024, these are books that stood out to me. I do try to limit my books to around 10. I'm not always very successful, but I try to have about 10 each quarter because then I feel like I have a higher chance of actually reading a good number of them before the end of the year. I do request all of the ones that are available on NetGalley. And I know for this list of 10 that I'm bringing today, I have already been approved for 6 of them. I know one of them I was not approved for and 3 I'm still waiting on. So we shall see if I get them, but getting them on NetGalley maybe increases my chance of reading it by like 3%. I don't know. I'm not very good at keeping up with my NetGalley, but that is always a goal for the future to be better at that. But I do have 10 books coming out in January, February, and March of 2024 that have struck my fancy for some way. And I'm going to tell you about them and see if these also sound good to you, if they are on your radar as well. I would also love to hear in the comments if there are any other books that I'm not mentioning today that you think sound good. I did try today to not talk about any sequels. There was one that I had on my list that I learned as I was looking it up that it was the 3rd book in a series, and it sounded so good, but I would obviously want to start at the beginning of the series, so I took it off the list. It helped me to narrow down my choices actually, so that was not a bad thing. We're going to go down the list according to publication date or projected publication date, and I can tell you I only have 1 for January, and then a handful for 4 for February, and then 5 for March. So they're pretty not evenly split here, but let's just go ahead and get started. So the first one is The Mysterious Case of the Alberton Angels. This stood out to me, number one, because Lindsay from Lindsay's Little Library has talked about Janice Hallett before, and she really likes her writing and has been intrigued by some of her books. And so when I saw that she was coming out with a new one, and then I learned that it's kind of about a cult, I was intrigued. Absolutely. So the Alberton Angels was a cult that brainwashed a teenage girl into thinking that her baby was the Antichrist. And then when the girl came to her senses and ended up calling the police, the angels all committed suicide and the mother and the baby disappeared. That's crazy. Then fast forward 18 years later, there's a true crime author and another author, or a journalist and a true crime author, something along those lines. 2 people are both individually trying to find this Alberton baby, this now 18-year-old kid. Their paths cross and they end up working together to try to find this mysterious missing kid. But as they are getting into the nitty-gritty, they discover that things are a little bit more strange and dark than they ever thought, and their lives kind of get wrapped up and they risk becoming a part of this craziness that they're uncovering. So I just feel like that mystery sounds really intriguing. I love a book that talks about cults, and I'm curious to read something by Janice Hallett because I know Lindsay really likes her. So that comes out on January 23rd. Then we have in February on the 6th, a Kristen Hanna book. And of course, if Kristen Hanna's writing a book, I absolutely want to read it. And this one that's coming out in February is called The Women. And this is a historical fiction set around the time of the Vietnam War. So we follow a young woman, Frankie. It's in 1965. Frankie is kind of a good girl. She's lived a bit of a sheltered life. She's in nursing school. And then the war breaks out. I think her brother gets drafted. And she decides that she's going to kind of follow him and join the nursing corps in Vietnam. While there, of course, she is shocked and appalled at the chaos and destruction of war. And then when she comes back home, that shock doesn't end as she comes back to an America that's just changed. It's politically like very fraught and very divided, and just a lot of people had big feelings about the Vietnamese War. And unfortunately, soldiers who went over, maybe without even a choice, came back to a lot of hatred and a lot of just difficult situations. So through the lens of this one woman's story, Kristen Hanna is going to take a look at women in war times in particular. I think women who are on the front lines, women in the home front, and just kind of take a look at women who put themselves in harm's way for the sake of a greater good. And I'm very interested in reading another Kristen Hanna. I haven't read everything by her, and I tend to like her historical books better than her contemporary ones. So I'm really, really eager to read this one. And I was approved for the audiobook on NetGalley, so I'm thrilled about that. The next book I have for February comes out on the 13th, and it's a little bit different. It's called The Fox Wife by Yangzi Chu. I did read The Night Tiger and I really enjoyed it, but it was strange. And I have a feeling this one is going to be the same. It is a historical. It's set in Manchuria in 1908. I think similarly to Night Tiger, this is going to talk about folklore in China, in particular around foxes and foxes being spirits. So we follow a detective named Bao who's hired to discover the identity of a woman who was found frozen in a doorway. And so he's going to try to find out what happened to her. And then in another storyline, we have this family whose sons never lived past their 24th birthday, but then a servant joins the household named Snow, and their luck changes, or does it, when she arrives? But Snow herself is really bent on vengeance because of her lost child. I'm sure these two storylines connect in some way. The description was pretty convoluted. All I know, it's going to follow, there's going to be kind of a quest traveling from China to Japan. We're going to follow two people, Bao and Snow, and then this whole idea of foxes as spirits and legend and folktale of China is going to play a huge part in the story. So potentially some magical realism in there. I'm not sure, but I'm very interested. And I also was approved for the audiobook of this one. Gotta love when it's the audiobook. The chances of me actually reading it before it comes out or shortly after it comes out are much higher. Moving on to the next historical book that I have coming out in February on the 13th also is coming out, The Phoenix Crown. This is by Kate Quinn and Janie Chang. And it takes place in San Francisco, 1908. So almost the same time actually as The Foxwife, only totally different part of the world. But we follow two women, two wronged women. One of them is an opera singer who really just needs her career to have a second chance, a boost, a lifeline, something. And also we follow a Chinese embroiderist who is determined to escape an arranged marriage. Both of these women come in contact with this railroad magnate named Henry Thornton. And Henry Thornton is kind of a shady character, I think. And I believe he's the one that's going to wrong both of these women. He's a Chinese artifact and antique collector. And part of his collection is this Phoenix crown. Well, these two women are pretty mad at Henry, and I'm sure other people are mad at him too. But then the huge San Francisco earthquake and fire happens, and Henry disappears. Where did he go? We don't know. But 5 years later, the crown shows up at a costume party in Paris. How did it get there? We don't know. But both of these women go on a quest for justice. Do they go together or not? I don't know. But I'm intrigued, and I have enjoyed Kate Quinn's stories before, so I'm looking forward to that one. Finally, in February, another historical book. I guess February is the month for historical fiction for me. But on the 20th comes The Hidden Life of Cecily Larson by Ellen Baker. In this one, our main character is Cecily. We have two timelines of her life, when she is a child and then when she's 94 years old. Cecily, when she is a child, is given up by her parents, ends up at a circus, ends up falling in love with somebody named Lucky that she probably shouldn't have. So we kind of follow that storyline and how, like, what happens in her life as a child into her teenage years. And then we also follow her at 94 years old, and her family, one year as a gift, gives her a DNA test kit. And that DNA test reveals some family secrets, things that she's kept hidden for decades, things that reveal a part of her long lost kind of love story, a tragic love story. And that maybe her family is not exactly her family, but how did they become her family? I don't know, but I'm very eager to read that. I feel like that sounds really good. Moving on into our March books. The first one that I have is not a typical Krista read, but it's Simone St. James, and I just love her. For some reason, I really enjoy her thrillers. And she has another one coming out in March on the 6th called Murder Road. That's pretty much exactly as it sounds. We follow a couple who's on their honeymoon. They end up picking up a hitchhiker because he's bleeding and they take him to the hospital. He dies. Other people start dying on this same road, and this couple becomes suspect in these murders. That's about all I know. There's most likely something supernatural going on. Simone St. James loves her some ghost stories. So I am very curious to read that one. It will probably not happen in October and not at night, but I'll read it because I enjoy her books. On March 19th, we have something a little different, a little bit of a sci-fi time travel-y type of a book called The Day Tripper by James Goodhand. And this one, if you read Una Out of Order, it sounded like that to me, where this guy, I don't know what happens, like somebody from his past comes and beats him up and leaves him by the river. And when he wakes up, it's like many decades later. He's very old. His life is not following the same trajectory as it was when he last remembered things. So he's now decades older. Then he wakes up the next day and he's like 10 years older from that original starting point. And we kind of hop around from year to year in his life, and he has to piece everything together to try to figure out how to get his life back on track. And it's just going to talk about like how the small choices that we make can have lasting consequences. And I love kind of that philosophical discussion in a book that's going to be a little bit mind-bendy, I think. Just sounds fun to me. The Day Tripper. And I love the cover. Then we have another mystery called How to Solve Your Own Murder. And this is by Kristen Perrin, and it comes out on March 26th. This one says it's good for fans of the Thursday Murder Club, which I really enjoyed, and Knives Out, which I've never seen, but I feel like I would like. And the short description of this one is that it's a woman who spends her entire life trying to prevent her foretold murder, only to be proven right 60 years later when she's found dead in her sprawling country estate, and her grandniece has to try to figure out what happened and catch the killer. I'm into it. It just sounds like a lighter, fun mystery. Next, I have my only middle grade on the list. It also comes out on March 26th, and it's called Olivetti. Look at that cover. It's stunning. I love it so much. This is by Ali Millington, and this one says for fans of Wish Tree and A Rover Story. I love both of those. And we follow the main perspective of this typewriter named Olivetti. Turns out typewriters can remember everything that gets typed into them. So when Olivetti one day gets left at a pawn shop and the mother of this family that he has belonged to goes missing, he breaks the rules of the typewriter in order to communicate with the son of this family. The son, I guess, goes and buys, I don't know how the son comes back into contact with the typewriter, but he does. And Olivetti breaks the rules, communicates with the son to share with him some of the memories of what the mom had typed into it. And together, the son and the typewriter go on a hunt to find the missing mother. I'm down. That sounds so good. It sounds so good. And it has a gorgeous cover. And finally, we have a romance, contemporary romance by Tracy Garvis Graves. I've only read one book by her, and I liked it okay. But this one sounds like a lot of fun. It comes out on March 26th. It's called The Trail of Lost Hearts, and it's going to involve some hiking. So in this one, we follow two people who've had some hard knocks. In particular, Ren is our female character, and she's had two major kind of devastating blows of her life. And she decides she's going to get things back together and just give herself time to breathe and think by going geocaching in Oregon. And I don't know exactly what geocaching is because I've never done it, but what I understand is that you can look up the coordinates of where there is a cache. You could try to hike to find that cache, and you can leave like a note, or I don't know, there's sometimes a little box and you can leave, like, sign a book that you've been there, that you found it. So you can go, there's like geocaching apps that you can look in your area for where people have left a geocache and you can go find them. But while she's out doing this, she comes across another hiker who's kind of doing the same thing. Marshall, he's a psychologist, also geocaching after some life blows of his own. So they're both out there trying to get their lives back together, giving themselves space to breathe, and they decide to work together. Ren doesn't really want to work with Marshall at first, but I guess he rescues her a couple days later from some precarious situation, and then they decide to hike together. And as along the way, I'm sure they talk and have some good discussions and work out some things in their life and fall in love, of course, because it's a romance. So that just really sounds fun to me. Hiking, geocaching, a little bit different, dealing with life's problems. Yeah. So there you have it. Those are the 10 books that I am looking forward to in the first quarter of the year, of the new year. I would love to hear from you if you think any of these sound good. If any of these are on your radar, what other books coming out in the January, February, or March do you have kind of your eyes on? And let me know. And later on in the month, I will be talking about how I've been doing with reading my anticipated reads. I have 3 years to look back on and see how I'm doing with those, which ones I own, which ones I want to read, which ones are no longer kind of on my radar. Yeah, we'll see. We'll take a look. But for today, that's going to be it. Thank you so much for watching. Let's chat in the comments, and I will talk with you in another video very soon. Bye.